Alright, so, hello. I guess the first thing is if someone in the chat could tell me if you can actually hear me, and how the audio compares to the game audio that I'm now talking over. If the game audio is actually audible. Alright, so, hello. Oh, oops. I guess the first thing is if someone in the chat could tell me if you can actually hear me. I just found out that I am audible myself because I didn't mute the mirror of the stream I have playing. So, ahoy there! We can actually hear me. I'm also not... I forget also how much there is a delay on this. So, yeah. The game is audible but a little quiet. Okay. I do... So this one's a bit of a pain because the in-game audio cannot be adjusted piecemeal. Like, you can't turn up the dialogue and down the music and all of that stuff like you can in some games. So... And meanwhile, I could use 10% more Scott or 10% less Obra Dinn. Okay, great. The other thing is that when I switch off the window to adjust the volumes, the game audio just stops. So, we're just going to have to wing this a little bit. I'm not cosplaying, this is just how I dress. Alright. We're just going to have to wing it. If the audio becomes a problem, just let me know. So... Welcome, and I am not going to apologize for long rambling introductions, because at this point, long rambling introductions are just de rigueur for me. So, this is my return of the Obra Dinn stream that I have actually been planning for some time now. So, obviously, when this game first came out, I was really, really excited about it. Biscuit will be passing through. She's guest star. When this game first came out, I was really excited about it, and I played it immediately and fell in love with it. And, you know, I actually played through it fully twice, which is my normal standard for playing through a video game. I played through it twice without looking up anything or finding out anything. Or engaging in any sort of conversation or looking at the wikis. The first time is to get through it as best I can. The second time is to get through it and to make sure I miss nothing. So I call that my scouring playthrough. I do the same thing with like people who listen to my live chat last week for my supporters. They know that I ended up doing like 3 different playthroughs of Demon's Souls before I allowed myself to look up anything. But anyway, so I really enjoyed this, and then after I finished my second playthrough, I noticed that there was a lot of discussion online about this game that was along the lines of, how the hell was I actually supposed to know this, or you can't do this without process of elimination, or you have to guess at times. And I was like, no, this is patently not true. The game is actually very clear. It gives you a lot of information, and the more personal knowledge you have, the more bonus clues you get. And so I wanted to do a stream where I would just kind of like prove the world wrong and say, no, look, you can find absolutely all the information in the game itself. It is here. There are, to my knowledge, by my count, there are only 2 characters that you absolutely cannot determine positively except by process of elimination. Just 2. Okay, all of the rest, there are ways to positively identify them built into the game, and if you bring outside knowledge into the game, there's even more. The game doesn't require outside knowledge, but the outside knowledge becomes bonus clues. So I decided that I was going to do a stream to prove everyone wrong. And now it's been 6 years since it was released, so I think it's time, or I may have been sleeping on this for a little too long. So sorry about that. But we're gonna do it now. Now, as long, I mean, it's still topical. People are still. So this game still exists. You can still buy it. In fact, it's very cheap now. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The point is, I'm finally doing the stream that I meant to do 6 years ago. My goal for this is to provide a very methodical, careful, patient, maybe even a little cozy playthrough, where the goal is to really notice everything. Every little detail. Actually, let me go back a second, because some of you may not, it's been 6 years since this game came out, so it's practically ancient now. This is basically a retro game, which you can tell by the graphics in the little window. But if you don't know, this was created by Lucas Pope back in 2018. It is a insurance investigation simulator. So you are investigating an insurance claim. This is a follow-up to his previous work, where you worked as a customs and immigration agent in Papers, Please. So, he has a very specific genre of paperwork simulation. But what this really is one giant 4-dimensional logic puzzle. That's all this is. It's just a giant logic puzzle, which is why it was right up my alley, because I love logic puzzles. So anyway, but it's also really, really gorgeously done, and there's a lot of very good game design in it, and a lot of good puzzle design in it. So it's really worth talking about. But what I wanted to do with this, and I took a lot of time to figure out how to do this, which is why I'm also taking a lot of time telling you exactly how I'm going to do this, because there's going to be some rules. Okay? Because every fun thing is improved with rules. And I'm good with rules. I like rules. I can follow rules. I don't even have to question them. I love rules. Like, in a previous era, if I had been in the right place in the world, I would have let war crimes happen. That's how much I like to just follow rules. So we're going to have some rules. Okay? The point is, as I said, though, methodical, careful, and patient playthrough. I'm going to try and emulate, not necessarily recreate, but emulate my first playthrough, assuming that I was a little bit more methodical and a little bit more patient. I'm not just going to take you through the wiki page. Any idiot can read a wiki page and say, here's the 10,000 clues that tell you how to identify Hamadou Diol. That's not my goal here. My goal is to actually take you through this game as if we were really, really rational but patient, skilled logicians playing the game together for the first time. Okay? I'm going to let the game mostly speak for itself after I get done with this blathering. Okay? The game actually kind of pulls you through it at a really good pace. And that's to its credit. And I'm not going to fight that pace. There is a tendency for new players, the first time you play it, to actually fight the game's pacing. We're not going to do that. Which is why, ultimately, we're going to break this playthrough down into 3 phases, which are going to be spread out over 2 different streams. It's technically 4 phases because there's a tutorial, but 3 basic phases that we're going to follow as we go through this game, which are actually also good phases for deductive reasoning. Like if you wanted to solve a logic puzzle, or if you're a forensic scientist who needs to brush up on their skills to solve a major crime, and you came to some idiot running a paperwork simulator on YouTube to help you out, God help us all, but, just help walk you through that process a little bit, just sort of the mindset. Okay? Obviously, I am going to spoil this entire game beginning to end. I'm going to spoil this game beginning to end realistically 3 full times. And I'm going to spoil the hell out of this game. There will be nothing unspoiled. Everything will be rotten and decayed by the end. It will all be spoiled. If you've never played this game, or you never managed to finish it, and you don't think you're ever going to, you're going to get, just by watching and hanging out with me, you're going to get the experience of playing the game the way a really, really smart, sexy gaming genius would from beginning to end. If you played it yourself and solved it, but you were left with questions like, how the hell was I actually supposed to tell the difference between the Peters brothers? Or why is it bad luck to whistle on a ship? You're going to get those answers. And if you just want to re-experience the game because it really is a work of art, this also will work for you. The one rule I'm going to ask everybody in the chat to follow is this. No spoilers in the chat. There are a few people watching who have never played this game. And if you have played this game, you know that there are certain moments in this game that are like gut punch moments that are really, really wonderful to experience. So I'm going to ask everybody who knows the game to not share any information about the game. And if you think I missed something, trust me, I will probably circle back to it later. Because one of the things I'm going to be doing in emulating my first playthrough is not discovering or pointing out information until I had discovered it myself in my first playthrough for the most part. In fact, I'm actually going to play it a little bit stupider than I played it the first time. So, okay. So that's the whole thing. That is the speech, and now we are going to get ready to get started as if we have never played this game before, and we are just booting it up. Oh, one last little thing is, when there is dialogue, I'm not going to talk over it, especially because there's a little issue where you can't adjust the dialogue volume relative to the other volumes of the game. So I'm going to shut my mouth for the dialogue. And actually, this is going to be a little bit tricky to talk about, especially the first time through. So, let us click begin and begin. Oh wait, let me first, whoops. It's already a disaster, I forgot how to do streaming. Alright, now, let me click begin, and we can begin. Okay. Oh, one last thing. Be super... Oh, I'm still getting that the game audio is just too damn loud. Okay. Okay. Alright, I'm gonna try and adjust that. You know what, actually, I'm gonna stop trying to adjust it on the stream here. Or on my streaming. I'm gonna... Yeah, darn it, just bear with me a second. Yeah, Obra Dinn is super duper loud, so the title screen music is really, really pompous. But in the game itself, there's actually very limited sound effects and audio, but if we need to, we'll adjust the in-game volume going forward. I will also, for those people who aren't looking at the screen, I will actually go ahead and read text. So we have a, a flyer here telling us that the good ship Obra Dinn was lost at sea in 1803. That it was built in London in 1796, weighing 800 tons with an 18-foot draft. It was captained by Robert Witterell and crewed by 51 men. And it was on a voyage. Oh, and I didn't read fast enough and it's gone. So I hope you were watching. And this letter has been sent to us, the Chief Inspector of the Insurance and Claims London office of the Honourable East India Company, indicating that the Obra Dinn has returned, and we are to go to Falmouth immediately and prepare a full insurance investment. 4 years later.
Company man woke me up. Said you'd need ferry to the Obra Dinn. Not many eager for that job. Seems a bit late if you ask.
I didn't.
What's in the box?
I don't know. Hoist it up in a few minutes.
Hey! Ow!
carefully.
And so here we are on this ship. We have been ferried out to the Obra Dinn, and the first thing I'm going to do is change the vertical look. And we'll leave the audio volume here for now. Okay, so interestingly enough, there are there's 3 different voice actors for the main character. I think it's 1 male and 2 female, and you're assigned a voice at the start of a new playthrough, so I've been assigned one of the female voices, which is a neat touch. And we find ourselves down on the, at the bottom of the ladder, climbing onto the Obra Dinn, the ship that was lost at sea for 4 years and returned with all hands lost. And now we are just free to kind of roam around at the ship, looking forward. And this, the game for the moment just wants you to kind of wander around and take things in. We have the forward hatch, it is not open. Overhead, we can see the sails and the riggings are torn and damaged. We have the mast, or the rear mast is broken and has been tied back together. There is a body here covered with flies. And if we climb up onto the aft castle, we can see a skylight, a strange shining light in the distance. And then we have some doors here. This one doesn't open, and we'll notice... Whoops.
It's too heavy!
Alright, we're going to ignore that for a moment. The ferryman is telling us that the box is too heavy to lift up to us. But we'll go ahead and we'll peer in here. And we have a little sleeping berth, little quarters. Doors you cannot open are marked with an X, and we'll encounter a few of them throughout the game. And we have another another quarters here.
It's too heavy! Lift it yourself!
And then, of course, he will continue to yell at us now until we climb back down. Because we were entrusted with this... Yeah, why?
It's too heavy. Take it yourself or open it here.
Okay. And now we can go ahead and we can open the box. This was provided to us, well, we'll find out. We're going to discover this all together. My jaunty hat. The Return of the Obra Dinn, a catalog of adventure and tragedy, and this was written in 1807, so this was penned in the same year that the ship returned. I trust that you now find yourself aboard the Obra Dinn. I expected this day to come, and my every intention was to tell the ship's strange tale within the pages of this book. Regrettably, failing health has allowed me to produce only the basic outline that follows. Your presence on the Obra Dinn is critical. I leave the discovery of its fate and the completion of this book in your hands. The next few pages will seem bewildering at first. It will make sense in time. Use the pocket watch to determine the identity and fate of everyone aboard. Complete each chapter accurately and return the book by guaranteed post to the French Office of Affairs in Morocco. The bargain chapter will remain unknown to you. I possess the details within, but have elected to keep them private for now. And it is signed Henry Evans. And then if we flip through the book, we can see we have a table of contents, some basically information, and then it's divided into chapters. We have a map showing the Atlantic portion of the ship's route, where it was going to go sail south through the Atlantic, around the Horn of Africa, and then remember it was bound for the Orient. We have a plan of the entire ship. showing its, I think, what, 4 decks? So we have a main deck, gun deck, the orlop deck. The orlop deck is the deck that sits at the water level. And then below that is the cargo hold. And we might also note that the map will mark where we are. So standing in the ferry, we are on the starboard side of the ship, and we are even with the orlop deck. That actually will be useful to know later. Okay. We have a complete crew manifest, listing Captain Robert Witterell, the mates, bosuns, ship's officers, tradesmen, tradesmen. There were passengers and artists, stewards, midshipmen, topmen, seamen, and we may not even know what any of these words mean at this point. We also have 2 sketches, or 3 sketches technically, that were made on the ship. And as we highlight people's faces, we see they're blurred out. One just shows the crew on the deck at their leisure, various other people. 4 people labeled as Formosan royalty. And then what appears to be, I'll move them. And then what appears to be a drawing of an execution by firing squad taking place on the ship. And again, the game gives us this without really any context. So we just get to leaf through this right now. And then we come to the main body of the book, which is divided into 10 chapters, and all of the pages are blank, save for occasionally there is a circled location. So we can leaf through this, and we'll see all the pages are blank. We're not going to leaf through every page here. And then we get to this one chapter which was referenced, which was the bargain. This chapter will remain unknown until you leave the ship and return the book to me. And it's got the initials HE for Henry Evans, the person who sent us the book. And then finally, at the very back of the book, we do have a glossary of terms in case we don't know, what the job of the captain or the bosun was, or what a topman is, or what a seaman is. I am not going to go through these with you, but I will share the information as it becomes important. Because I don't think it's fun to read a glossary, and we've now spent a lot of time just reading this book. The other thing in the box is this pocket watch with a skull on it, the memento mortem. Now I'm going to climb back up on the deck and we'll go back to explore, but memento mortem is actually a deliberate variation of memento mori. A memento mori was an art motif which could be included in architecture or art, painting, sculpture, even drawn in like illustrations of books. They came into popular use in the medieval period. It was a Christian tradition, and the idea was that these little things, you would see like a skull carved into a piece of architecture, or wilting flowers drawn into an illustration of a book, and it was there to remind you that people are mortal and all people must die. It was the real life medieval classical equivalent, or medieval Christian equivalent of Valar Morghulis, all men must die. This memento mortem is remember death as a noun rather than remember you will die as a verb. So that was Lucas Pope's deliberate change on it. But now as we get close to this corpse, the pocket watch comes out and we can interact.
Captain! Open the door! Kick it in. Lest we break it down and take more than those shells!
You bastards may take exactly what I give you!
Okay, and so we hear some dialogue, and now we can see a person firing a gun straight at us, but it's not at us, it's at this person behind us. He is being shot, obviously trying to storm the captain's quarters. Another man behind him. And we can see someone else climbing up onto the aft castle. We also notice that we can't walk around very far in this frozen moment in time. So, and this is the power of the memento mortem now. What it does is it allows us to hear and then see the final moment of a person's life, the last moment before they die. Okay. And then, after we have interacted with a corpse for the first time, the book will flip itself open, and it will fill in a page for us. Well, first it will start by filling in a chapter heading, which will show us where the ship was on its voyage. And then each corpse will get a page. And will be presented with... Well, there's basically 4 things. So first we get a picture of the person and this statement that this unknown soul met an unknown fate. And we're asked, who is this? How did they die? This is ultimately the goal of the game, is to figure out who the person is who died, identify them. The game's going to give us a little tutorial now. Okay. And this is a little helpful mechanic. So, if a sketch appears blurred out in the book, we do not have enough information according to the game to positively identify them. So we don't know who that person is who was shot. Okay. Now, the game, the blurring of the faces and stuff, because the faces will be unblurred when we have the information necessary to identify them. You don't always have to trust that, and it's going to be important, like, depending on how you play through the game, you may not always trust that. Right, according to the game. But the game also can't take into account information that you have that is not included in the game, except sometimes it actually does, and I'll point that stuff out too. But we're going to take the game at face value for now. We also get a transcript of the dialogue that played out, and the X marks the speaker who died. So the person who said, "Captain, open the door, lest we break it down," that was the corpse. The other people saying, "Kick it in, and you bastards may take exactly what I give you," those are other people in the scene. That can be super helpful when trying to identify people. We also get a deck plan that shows where the corpse was found, and it also shows us our current position, even when we're in these memories. Or, I think the players call these dioramas, the frozen scenes of people's deaths. And finally, we get the sketches from the beginning of the book, which shows us highlighted which people are in the scene. And if we pay careful attention, we notice that this fella here is unblurred. We have enough information now to identify this person in the sketch. Okay. So our job with each scene is just then to figure out who the person is and how they died. Okay? And as I said, we don't know who this person is, but we do know what happened to them. We know they were shot. And there's a lot of options here for what happened to the person. And many of these are never used in the game. And as we go through the game, I'm going to talk more about the game mechanics and some of the really brilliant, clever mechanics this game's used. But for right now, we're in tutorial mode, which I just realized that my notes are... Oh no, I'm in the right place. My little notebook is in the right place. It's still on the tutorial. So we're going to go ahead and note that this person was shot. And then we have to say, what was he shot by? He was shot by a gun. But in this case, we're also asked who was responsible for shooting the person. And we know this by listening to the dialogue. We know that they said, "Captain, open the door," and then the captain opens the door and says, "You can have what I take you," and shoots the guy. So we know he was shot by Captain Robert Witterell. Okay. Okay, and then we can back out of the book. And when we back out of the book, you'll hear this clicking noise, and this door will open, which will take us back to reality. But as we keep looking around the scene, we'll also... we can zoom in... Whoops, if I can find the right button for it. I'm not used to doing this with mouse and keyboard. I played this on my PlayStation, so I had a controller. So if I fumble with the controls a little bit, that's why. But we can also zoom in on people, and we will see who they are in the various sketches, which will also help us. There's other things that we could do with the zooming, too. But one thing we can do here is we can zoom in on this guy, who we're pretty sure, who we know is the captain. And then if we open the book, it'll flip us directly to the sketch, where we can now highlight the captain and say, "I know who this guy is." And the game's giving us tutorials too. So the game's giving you the same tutorial I am. And I know that we're taking a lot of time on this. Okay, but so now the game's saying we know enough to know who this guy is, and we sure do. And finally it reminds us there were 60 people on the ship when it left England, because there was the captain, 51 crew, and then the passengers. Decisive information is rare. You may need to make assumptions using partial information. You may need to use process of elimination. Good luck. One last thing that the game doesn't identify, it doesn't explain yet, but it will explain later, is that there will be between 1 and 3 triangles above a person's face if it's unblurred. That indicates how difficult it is to deduce their identity. So this is a 1 triangle. This is a really easy one to figure out. We know this guy is Captain Witterell. Okay. And now we can leave this scene. And when we leave this scene, we notice that now the door to the captain's cabin is opened, and we can see another body straight ahead of us. This is another thing that will happen periodically, is as the ship is moved around, or as elements of the ship are moved in memories, it will also open additional paths to us. So now the captain's cabin is open, and we can see another body. And we'll just go right ahead and check this out. Uh-oh.
Where are they? Must be in here someplace.
They're at the bottom of the sea.
That's a lie.
Okay. So we see this guy. He's getting knifed. His throat is being cut open by the captain. Our fella from the first scene is laying dead out here now. And we can't spot our friend who is climbing up on the castle. But if we go out here, we can see that he is dropping down here to outflank the captain. Now the game sort of enforces a bit of patience on you. Okay, it doesn't reveal the book right away. It gives you some time to take the scene in. And the enforced patience is actually really important. Like, as is the fact dioramas are stationary, as is the fact that it does the silent movie thing, where it blanks the screen, presents us with the dialogue first, and then shows us the scene, and gives us plenty of time to look around before it lets us futz around with the book and start answering things. Now, we have no idea who this fellow is, but again, we know exactly how he died. He was knifed, and he was knifed by Captain Witterell. Okay, we can review his dialogue if we want to, but we don't really need to, and we can look at the map. And we've sort of gotten everything that we're going to get out of this scene now. Okay, you also note that chronologically that scene happens almost immediately after the previous scene. I just need to adjust one thing here. Okay. So I'm being asked if the game will stop... I'm just... I gotta get the chat on screen, I'm sorry. So I'm being asked if the game will stop you from entering incorrect information. It will not. And more importantly is how the game evaluates whether your information is correct, which we will discover. We're still in tutorial phase now. So this whole segment is a very deliberate tutorial. And a very well-built tutorial. And like I said, I'm trying to let the game just speak for itself right now. So I'm letting us learn the mechanics as the game teaches them to us. And we have another body here. So we're going to go ahead and pop into this one. Okay, so this is probably the fellow who came down from above, because remember earlier he had a knife in his mouth. Now that his knife is in the captain, which hasn't stopped the captain from braining him. Our other two fellows are dead, and nothing else has really changed out here. So we can wander, but there's really nothing else to see. Yeah, no, I mean this is a very accurate depiction of what insurance claims adjusters do, Rallycat. As part of my accounting degree, I did take I took a course that was meant for there was actuarial work for claims adjusting, and we actually did have a lab practical where we were given these pocket watches, and yeah, it was little stuff, you know, because we were just students, but you know, it's pretty wild to do this in real life. Okay. Yeah, the captain is a total badass. The Avatar is saying, Captain clearly got his rank by the Klingon promotion system. So we know this guy was clubbed by Captain Witterell. Okay. I should also point out, no, we'll come back to that mechanic later when we need it. Okay. And now... Also in this scene, I didn't take note of it, but this door is now open in the captain's quarters. Okay. But we are done here in this scene, so we're going to wander back out to real life. And now I have to give a little bit of a warning. So there are some very difficult themes in this game. There are themes of self-harm. There are themes, there's obviously... a lot of violence, and, you know, a good bit of gore. There's some really disgusting sound effects in places. And so, at this point, if you're not good with that stuff, you may want to get off the ride here. Okay? Specifically, and I'm only saying that because I know there is a specific scene happening right now that can trouble people, and that's the last time I'm going to give a forewarning. From here on out, this is going to deal with some very troubling, triggering things, including self-harm, violence, and just general grossness. Because now we have another body here.
Abigail, your brother, my friend, I shot him dead. I'll be with you soon, my love. Please forgive me for everything.
we see now that the captain has taken his own life with his pistol. He was speaking, apparently, to this woman who had already passed away by that time. The other folks are still laying here. And there's really no point in wandering the ship at this point because there's nothing else to see. We can sort of wander around, but I'll look away from that. So we have this person here now. Okay. And this is almost now the end of the tutorial. I consider the tutorial to stop in one more fate. Okay, so now notice that because we already identified Captain Robert Witterell and locked in his identity, it's already written in the book. And every time we fill in someone's identity, whether we fill it in on a book page or whether we fill it in using the sketch or whatever, from that point on, that person will be named wherever we find them, whatever name we give them. So if we were to have given him the wrong name, like let's say we decided that this guy was, I don't know, Topman Maba, then that's what he would be labeled throughout the rest of the game. So if we put in wrong information, we might then later use that information to say, oh, well, obviously since we identified this guy as Maba, then it was Maba who knifed that other guy and clubbed that other guy. Okay. So in this case, we know that the captain took his own life using a gun. And now the game gives us a little tutorial and says, this may or may not be correct. And it tells us that it's not going to check our answers until we have 3 correct answers. Once we have filled out 3 people's fates and names that are correct, the game will tell us we got 3 people correct. And that is specifically a protection against brute forcing, which is where you just cycle through a bunch of names, hoping that you limit it down to a number of a number of different options, and then you can guess one and then guess the other. It doesn't completely prevent brute forcing, because if you already have 2 answers filled in, you can use that as an opportunity to go to a person that you maybe think is one of 3 people, and then just try those 3 different names to see if it works. But we are going to take a little bit of extra time here inside this scene now. And we're going to focus on the captain's dialogue, because he said, Abigail, your brother, my friend, I shot him. Dead. Okay. And that tells us some things in this scene. For example, it identifies this woman he was speaking to as someone named Abigail. And as we scroll down the manifest, we find someone here named Abigail Hoscott Witterell. She has the same last name as the captain, Witterell, but she also has she has a maiden name, Hoscott. And since the captain just said that he shot her brother and his friend, we can go back now to that first body, the person he shot. And if we zoom in on the body and open the book, his face is now unblurred. The game is telling us again that we have enough information to identify him. If we look down the list, we spot someone with the last name Hoscott. And that is William Hoscott, the first mate. And if we're really attentive, you might notice that when Hoscott demanded that the captain open the door, he had a Scottish accent. They were extremely careful with hiring voice actors of the proper nationalities in this game. You can use people's accents to identify them. And now we have several fates filled in. So, okay. Right, and you can use people's nationalities. You'll see we're going to use all of this information as we play. But for now, that's all the information we're going to get out of this. And now we have access. And now what happens is when we finish all of the bodies in a chapter, or all of the fates in a chapter, at least once we've seen all of the pages in that chapter, it takes note of how many people passed away, and it tells or how many fates were covered in that chapter. I shouldn't even say passed away. And then we have these pages filled in now. Okay? And yeah, it was just pointed out by Game Boy BC50 or Game Boy 712 said, "Yeah, we're in the last chapter of the book. We're in chapter 10, the end." Which also means the captain, true to his duty, was the last person alive on the ship. So he went down with the ship. Okay. So let's keep exploring a little bit. I'm still going to consider us in the tutorial phase. But now we have the body of Abigail Hoskett Witterell, the captain's wife and brother to the first mate, William Hoskett. And I wonder if anybody in the chat has noticed any... Sorry. Okay. And so here we see Abigail. Looks like a piece of the ship's rigging has fallen. And as we look up, that's a bit odd. Yeah, I'm not going to try and play it up. This is an amazing reveal. Where now we see the ship is in the grasp of a kraken. Flailing tentacles, we can see a man being pulled off the rigging. We can see two men fighting with one of the tentacles. Half a corpse being dragged away. Water sweeping over the side of the ship. Another man being pulled up to his doom by the kraken. This guy taking aim and firing. Two women near the passenger's cabin, and this man. Okay. Nicholas is pointing out that I don't think going down with the ship normally presumes you execute the remaining crew. Though justified it seems in this case. Yeah, because there was an attempted mutiny. They were trying to storm the captain's cabin. They were after something about shells, but we don't know what it is. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And Matthew Austin in the chat is pointing out that this is an amazing moment where the game does a genre shift on you. Where from being a nautical murder mystery, the game has just said, actually, we're going to do some supernatural stuff. Which, of course, the game had already primed you to. It was a really interesting thing that the game did because, like, obviously the pocket watch is like this supernatural element, but it's also a game mechanic. And it's what makes the game work, right? So as a player, we naturally just accept that. It's like, okay, yeah, this isn't real, it's supernatural, but it's light supernatural. It's a supernatural that's an excuse to make the game work. This scene is the game saying, oh no, we're gonna do monsters, you know? So now, though, we're gonna go ahead and check off Abigail. We know that she was hit by falling rigging. And this is another important mechanic, is that the game will often accept several different answers for people. So for example, instead of indicating that the captain harmed himself. We could have said he was shot by a gun and then specified that he was the shooter of the gun. Okay, and here it will allow us to say either that she was crushed by a beast, or that she was crushed by the rigging, or that she was clubbed by a beast. Any of those answers, and there may be others that are valid. Okay, whoops. I didn't mean to back out of the book. Just pretend I didn't do that shit. Because now the game's going to throw another mechanic at us. So we're going back in the book a second. Okay. So I am going to say she was crushed by falling rigging. And the reason I'm going to say that is because the Kraken was not deliberately smashing her in the face. He was not clubbing her. He was not trying to. It was the rigging that killed her. He just happened to have a grip on it. He was attacking the ship. So I am not... The Kraken committed manslaughter at best in this case. Okay. Okay, we now have 3 correct answers. And when you have 3 correct answers, the game will typeset them in the book. Okay. Now, there is other information that I could identify in this scene. Okay. For example, Abigail did call to someone named Martin, and Martin was trying to rescue her, and I could surmise that this person is Martin. I'm ignoring the shaking pocket watch right now. But I'm not going to, because now, in accordance with, or actually, I'm gonna let the pocket watch go, and then we're gonna switch phases. So sometimes this is going to happen. In fact, this is going to start happening a lot. Where you'll come out of the book, and then the pocket watch will be trembling, and then it will draw you over to a glow. Because in the memory of her death, there was a corpse. And if we then interact with the corpse, we will bring it back with us into the real world. And now it will appear on the ship, and we can interact with it. Now, the more attentive among you may have noticed that we went from Chapter 10 to Chapter 7, meaning some time had passed between the Kraken incident and the attempted mutiny at the end. Okay? Time enough that these bodies were cleared off the deck. Okay. I will also point out the ghost mechanic where you bring the spirit back in the pocket watch and let it free. You have to follow the ghost. If you stop facing it with the camera and don't follow it, it will stay in place until you follow it. So it forces you to follow it, and then it forces you into another scene. Now, before we jump in and explore what the hell happened to this person, we are now going to change the rules of the game here. We are going into Part 2. Actually, sorry, Part 1. As I said, my goal here is to be... Oops. Okay, we're going to have to zoom out a little bit. Okay. Okay. As I said, my goal is to be very, very methodical. From this point on, the game is going to carry us in fits and starts from one scene to the next. We're going to go into a scene, it's going to reveal the scene, then we're going to bring a body out with us, and then we're going to follow it, and the game sort of starts rushing you a little bit. And then it'll pause for a little bit, and it'll let you take a breath and then go back and think about what you did, and then it'll sort of push you again. It has really excellent pacing. But because I want to be a super methodical investigator, and because I want to improve, I want to demonstrate the level of information that is available in the game, we are now going into what I'm calling Part 1, which is observation. From this point on, we're going to go where the game takes us. We're going to let it lead us through one scene and the next. We're not going to go back to any previous scenes. Not until the game is done pulling us through this part. We're going to observe every scene. We're going to be patient. We're going to take everything in that we can. We're not going to try and figure anything out. The only thing we are going to fill into the book in this part is the actual questions the book poses. Who is this specific person? What is their fate? If we can answer it at the moment the book asks us, we'll answer it. Otherwise, we're just going to leave it alone for now. And from this point forward, we're not going to guess. We're not going to surmise. We're not going to suppose. We are only going to rely on what I'm going to call positive identifications. That is, I have to be able to say, here is my evidence for why I believe this person is this. Okay. The other thing that you're going to start to notice right away is that the game is now going to start pulling us through things in reverse order. Whereas we saw the events of Chapter 10 unfold in forward order, from Hoskett trying to storm the captain's office, or captain's cabin, right up until the captain harmed himself. From this point forward, the game's going to tend to pull us backwards, and we're going to bounce around between different chapters. And at some point, we're going to have a few choices. So again, we're going to let the game take us where it does. The last thing I want to point out, watch the hands on the pocket watch, because they will tell us where in the book this person falls. The hour hand will fall on the person's chapter, and the minute hand will fall on the actual chapter in the book, and the minute hand will fall on their page. So I believe this is going to show us the hour hand is going to be on the 7, and the minute hand should be on the 6, I think, to indicate that this is Chapter 7, and this is the 6th person's fate in Chapter 7. Nope, it's the 7th. Damn, I was off. Okay. So here we are. Still in the Kraken attack. Okay. Our victim here is being torn in half. He's being torn apart. We have no way of knowing who he is. Or do we? You can see this person throwing a spear at a tentacle. There appears to be a boat with people falling from it. Other corpses on the deck. Whoops, I got hung up on a person. This anguished person clinging to the capstan. Person with a rifle. I absolutely love these guys tossing guns back and forth. This is a thing you see a lot. There's a lot of people throwing guns to each other. It is awesome. But I'm not actually going to point that stuff out until part 2. And then we have this guy here. Okay. We have no idea. Yeah, no, okay. Game Boy, yeah, he was torn in half by a beast. Okay. Okay, so now, the game is saying we can identify this fella. And when I played the first time, I actually did guess his identity. Okay? And you can. It is based on his appearance. In fact, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and point it out, just to prove the level of detail in the game. Okay? If you take note of the fella's... Whoops, I did it again. Again, I'm not used to the keyboard controls. Just bear with me. I gotta get back into the book. Into his page. Zoom in on him. There we go. And book. And... Okay. So if we were going through the book and we go through the passenger manifest, or the crew manifest, we might land on this gentleman, Maba. He is a topman, and he hails from New Guinea. New Guinea is an island in the South Pacific, and we might be aware that they have a cultural tradition of these full-body tattoos. And so, if that's something that we know about, that's a way we might deduce his identity. Whoops. How do I am having trouble getting back. Okay, there we go. Okay, and notice that the game is telling us that he's a difficulty 2 identity. So, you know, if we have that outside information, we can use that. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to consider that a positive identification because, again, we're going to be patient. We're going to be methodical. We have all the time in the world. We work in insurance. There's never an insurance emergency. Okay? There's always another day to come back to it. But we do know he was torn apart by a terrible beast. And as we come out of the book, another body has appeared on the deck. This person here has passed away. Yeah. People are commenting on the graphics, and it might be it's probably obvious to lots of you, but the graphics are meant to invoke specifically the Macintosh computer adventure games of a bygone era. And while that is a very deliberate stylistic choice that makes the game feel old-timey, it was also an important choice that made this game actually possible to make. Because it allowed him to use the stylized graphics to include a lot of detail without having to build 3D models or do super detailed sprite animation. Because one of the things is that these black and white dithered graphics were actually really, really good at showing very tiny details. Which is important because people's facial features and stuff will matter. That is also extremely well timed how the explosion goes off just as the sea becomes visible. So there is a crewman in the midst of that explosion, attached by a line to this other crewman who's trying to pull him back. Might have noticed, by the way, that the voices involved were actually very youthful. Compared to the other people, they had younger voices. Here we see... This is not... Oh, this is the person from before, who was torn in half. And then we can see 2 people coming up from the gun deck with guns as the ship is lurching. And they're stumbling on the ladder. And again, we have no idea who was lost in this scene, but we can say for sure they were exploded. Okay, so we can say, I think exploded is the word, right? Exploded. Blasted by an explosion. And again, his face is unblurred, so we have no way of identifying him. But that's okay, because we're just letting the game give us a little tour. Okay. Now this time, we don't have a spirit to bring back. But notice now that the forward hatch is open in this scene. And as with the captain's quarters before, when we return to reality, the forward hatch has now opened. Oh, okay. So a bit is a vertical, it's a vertical piece of wood that was used to secure a line. So those little pins there that you see, and these little pins are bits. The ship's main bit is a I don't know if I can find it. I'm not super nautical. It turns out I'm not like an actual seaman, but the ship's main bit is the strongest vertical the strongest vertical pin, and it would hold up the lines that secured it would secure the lines that held up the main sail. So, I'm sorry, I'm not nautical, I don't know what anything is, but yes, this is what a main bit is, and this is where it would be. Okay, and now we can come below to the gun deck. Okay, and we can see that the gun deck has guns on it, obviously. And before we go looking for bodies, we can just look around and explore, because the game wants us to do that. And up front here, we have a little bit of a galley, where, you know, food, you know, a galley, it's where food is prepared. Okay. And we do have a body here, and we can go ahead and check that out. But again, we should look around a bit first. Just step over that fella. Looks like we have some serious damage there, even note a cannonball. Some of these cannons are not secured. So you'll notice that the cannons are chocked. They would be chocked. They would also be tied down to secure them as the ship moved, but also to hold them in place because of the tremendous recoil. I want to say no, that's the bilge pump, or that's the well pump. Here, those three things. I was going to say maybe those are the main bits, but that's the well pump. I'll talk about that later. We can also open some doors. I'm not going to make you go through this every time because I know the ship's layout really well, but I will point out that as we explore the ship, we can refer to the map and it will tell us where we are, or the deck plan. So we're in the bosun mate's quarters. A ship's bosun was sort of the foreman. He was the supervisor of the sailors. Okay, kind of like a shop steward or a foreman. And he had an assistant who was called a mate. Most of the officers and the tradesmen on a ship had an assistant who was called a mate. So this is the bosun mate's quarters. And next to them is the bosun's quarters. And one thing we might take note of here, hanging here, is an odd piece of what might look like jewelry. This is actually a thing called a bosun's pipe. The bosun would wear it, and he would be able to blow it. And if you've ever heard like the standard nautical whistle where it goes like, whee, captain on the deck, or something like that, that's a bosun's pipe. It was specifically used because the very shrill, high-pitched sound was easy to hear even over other ships' noises and background noise. But it also led to a superstition on ships where it was considered bad luck to whistle on a ship because whistling could be mistaken for the bosun's pipe issuing an important order. And they had all sorts of different signals. Okay. These are the midshipmen's quarters, and we can see there's a body in here too, along with a trail of blood and a knife, and we're definitely going to want to investigate that. Midshipmen were young officers in training. Okay? So they were usually in their teenage years. They were learning to be ship's officers. They were usually people of the upper classes. The children of the upper-class individuals who were training. Someday they would be officers or even captainships of their own. So they were like in the ROTC program. And these are the steward's quarters. And we might notice distinctive uniform hanging in here. A collared jacket, and also this sort of wrap or tunic-like thing. Stewards were the servants of officers. So whereas the mates were assistants and professionals in their own right, who would someday become professionals of their own, the stewards were more like servants. Each of the ship's mates And the captain would have a steward who would share their meals and take care of their clothing and the other menial tasks. And these quarters here each belong to one of the ship's mates. The first mate, second mate, third mate, and fourth mate, who were the officers who ranked below the captain, who would help the captain run the ship and carry out his duties. And there's nothing really to note in any of these, except these quarters, the first mate's quarters, are currently locked. We can't get in there. And finally, at the back, this is the officer's mess, or the officer's quarters. So this was sort of a common room that the officers of the ship would use. It is actually directly below the captain's cabin, which is why it has these windows here, kind of, you know, spreading out to the sides. Obra Dinn is very careful about nautical tradition. People, as we go through the game, will stay to the places they belong. You will not have a non-officer in the officer's quarters. You will not have people working in positions that they are not checked out for. Okay, there's a concept called rated. Okay, there was only the helmsman could pilot the ship. They were the only one rated to pilot the ship. The topmen were the only seamen on board who were rated to go climbing around in the riggings and manage the sails and the lines. Okay, and the game, they're very careful about keeping people to their proper positions and places, and that information will be useful. But anyway, now let's get back to Chapter 7, The Doom, and see what happened down below decks, while above decks a kraken was killing everybody.
Sir, loose cannon! This is nearly over! Watch your flank!
Okay, so we see this fella here. He's being crushed by a loose cannon. The term is a nautical term. It referred to a cannon that had become unsecured and was either rolling free or had blasted itself free. And so we also see these two fellas, and they have powder charges. Those are bags of powder that would be, you know, loaded into a cannon to fire it. And remember above, somebody said throw the powder, and then there was an explosion. And that was just before this. This fella is running to rescue the person who's being crushed by the cannon. And meanwhile, we have some serious problems over here. Okay. So also, I noted that the book would sometimes have a blank page with a location noted on it, and the location would be circled. Those are actually a little bit of a navigational clue. If you're having trouble finding where to go next, if you flip through the book, a circled location on a blank page will tell you, hey, there's definitely a body you can find here to get into a new sequence. Okay. We're not going to spend too much time on these pages, but we do know that he was crushed by a loose cannon. Okay. And now there was another corpse in this scene. The pocket watch is telling us that this person had died immediately before the other person was killed by the loose cannon. And now we can bring their spirit back into the world. Go back. All right. So we know what happened here now, because we can see a tentacle has a cannon in its grasp that is firing. We know what the damage came from. And we can see this person here getting blasted by the cannon. Meanwhile, we'll just look around at the rest of the scene. The cannon is tearing through the wall, knocking these other fellows aside. These people, they're also preparing cannons to fire. I think it's kind of hard to tell what they have. So there were actually several tools that were used to load a cannon for fire. Including, so there is obviously the ramrod, which was used to pack down the powder before you put the cannonball in. But there were also a pair of tools that were used to clean out the cannon before you loaded a new shot. There was one that was kind of like a wire spring that you would use to scrape any remaining bits of powder and shrapnel out of the cannon before you put another charge in and then loaded another shot. Now what's really interesting is we have two folks here who died at the same time. But if we look in the scene, there's only one person in evidence being blasted by the cannon. Right? Where was the cannon? Oops. I know, it wants to show me another body. So we have one guy here in the cannon shot. It's this fella. Whoops. Oh, you're gonna make me... Okay, well, it's fine. Because we can't go back in time. So we're just gonna... Here is this person here. And it's fine, because remember, we're being patient. We're not trying to get all the answers right now. We're just trying to take in every scene. Okay, so if we don't get any information on this pass, we're going to come through again, and we're going to actually do some good to-dos. So now we're back a little bit in time, and we can see what happened immediately before that scene. So we've got two folks. One guy is bracing himself against the ship's port, the porthole, the window. Actually, that's a gun port. That's not a porthole. That's a gun port. The other guy is being held over the cannon's barrel by a tentacle that has reached it. While this person is being crushed to death against the cannon by the tentacle, and he has a lit fuse, or a lit spark. Which obviously he was in the process of lighting the cannon. And that order, by the way, belay spark, it was an order to don't fire. You know, he was about to fire and something went wrong, and the gunner or whoever's giving the order is saying belay spark. Do not light this cannon. Things have gone very, very wrong. Because, you know, someone was being held up against the muzzle of the cannon. So we don't know how this person died, but we know that they were crushed by a beast's tentacle. And now, remember when I said the game kind of moves us through in fits and starts? So it gave us a couple of bodies, and then each time we finished with one, it would give us another one, and we would carry it back. And now it chills out a bit, and it says, okay, no new bodies here, just now relax a little bit. And if we wanted to, we could now go back and fill in some information on what we had discovered. But again, we're not going to rush on that. We're just going to go back to reality. Because in reality now, something has changed. And the thing that has changed, whoops, forward near the galley, is the door to the head of the ship is now open. And we have a body sitting here. This is going to be another trigger warning for just, this is purely disgusting what you're about to experience. You might want to turn down your headsets. Alright, so we have a person here. He was relieving himself when the Kraken took hold of him. Meanwhile now, we can see we've gone back a little bit in time because things seem fairly peaceful down here. We've got this fella, he's getting some food ready. These folks are sitting and talking amongst themselves. We've got the bearded fella, and that person. And if we're really attentive, we might notice that guy's wearing a steward's uniform, because we know what a steward's uniform looks like. He's got the coat and the wrap, so we can identify him as a steward. It's actually a little bit hard to see, but I think this guy is also wearing a steward's jacket. But that's a little harder to pick up on. Okay. So that's actually not the origin of the phrase poop deck, since the Avatar made the joke, but that is the origin of going to the head, because that's how you went to the bathroom on the ship. And in fact, on some ships, they actually built little seats that sat out a little bit over the water right there in that head area, that were called seats of ease, specifically for pooping. Now, this is a gimme, and I hate this. This is the only thing I hate. Okay? The sketch of this person is just a pair of initials. E.S. There is a reason for that. And the reason is if we go looking through this, we find Edward Spratt, E.S., who was the ship's artist. He is the one who drew the sketches, which is why he only appears in the sketch as a pair of initials, because he signed the sketch. Okay? And we know he was crushed by a tentacle. However, I will forgive the game for that stupid gimme of, yeah, this guy's E.S. You know, we could see, oh, there he is, E.S. as Edward Spratt. And I haven't even been looking here in these things yet, but that's okay, because we're not really using the sketches yet. Because there is actually a way to positively identify the artist later without going to his initials. Meanwhile, it looks like there's a corpse above deck on the main deck. Huh. So before Edward Spratt met his terrible fate, someone died up on the main deck. Now we have to follow the ghost up to the main deck. And as I said, you have to keep the ghost in view or it will stop moving. Which is the game, again, just making sure. The game does not want you to get lost. It doesn't want you to get lost. It doesn't want you to get confused.
Let me on. Over my dead body, you bloody Dane. Huh? How's that?
There's no cause for trouble, boys. Get in the boat.
Thought I'd forget. You killed my brother. What? That was an accident. The ropes.
It wasn't his fault. I saw the whole thing.
Lies. I shouldn't have waited so long.
No, don't.
I agree with you, BC56. Spratt's death makes me queasy every time. That sound effect is disgusting. Okay. So we have this... So we have some crew members taking one of the ship's boats. 1, 2, 3, 4 people. But this guy's getting clubbed. Meanwhile, there's nowhere else we can really go. So, there's not really much to observe here yet. Doesn't seem to be anyone else in the boat. So we're just gonna wait on the book now. Sometimes you end up doing this. Sometimes there's just not enough to take in, and then you just wait for the scene to end and the book to open. But I still think that it is greatly to the game's credit that it enforces patience. Patience is an important part of this kind of like puzzle solving and investigation, which is why I'm forcing us on this, like, through our first, as we go through the game right now. Right now we're just focusing on taking everything in without thinking too hard or making deductions. We're letting all the details watch over us before we think too hard about anything. Of course, in this case, we have enough information to fill some information in. Okay, the dialogue tells us that, you know, if we look at who was marked as the speaker and who was marked as dead, the person getting onto the boat, or the person who wanted to get onto the boat who was just killed, was referred to... Damn it, I hit the wrong button again. Oh, no I didn't. Okay. Okay, so... the book. Okay. So this person was referred to as a bloody Dane. Okay. And if we scroll through the list of crewmen, or through the manifest, because it's not just the crew, it's everybody. Okay. We see only one person from Denmark. That is a seaman named Lars Lind. Okay. And a seaman was basically the lowest ranking person on the ship. They're rated only for working on the deck or below decks. They mainly did hauling, cargo, or, you know, moving cargo, loading, unloading, hard labor type stuff. The next rank up is the topmen, who are seamen who were rated to work above decks in the riggings. They could climb around, and, you know, and they were responsible for maintaining the sails lines, things like that. Okay, so we know that our victim here is Lars Lind. But the person who killed him, and we know he's being clubbed to death, the person who kills him blames him for the death of his brother. And if we look down the crew manifest, or down the manifest, we can see, you know, just scanning for last names, we note that there's only two people on the ship who shared a last name. We have a Nathan Peters and a Samuel Peters. So it is likely that one of the Peters brothers, if they are indeed brothers, is the one clubbing Lars Lind right now. We have no way of knowing, based on everything we've seen so far, or do we, which Peters this is. With some advanced knowledge, there is a clue that we could already be using, but we don't have that knowledge yet, and we're taking this slow. So, we just know he was clubbed by one of the Peters. And now we are done. And with this finishes off Chapter 7. Okay. Now, because we're bouncing around through time, it is kind of hard to put the events of what happened on the ship in order. Like, what was going on, how did things move, and whatever. We could sort of go through and leaf through Chapter 7 and kind of assemble things and say, okay, so we had these 4 crewmen, they were getting into a boat, getting into one of the ship's boats, and meanwhile, Edward Spratt was taking a poop. Edward Spratt was taking a poop, and then he was killed by the Kraken. That was the first appearance of the Kraken. Then down on the gun deck, the crewmen started to mount a defense, firing cannons. Several people were killed. Meanwhile, above deck, people were trying to fight off the Kraken, which ultimately ended with Abigail, the captain's wife, being crushed, and then the end of the chapter. Except there are 4 people. There are 7 people. Okay? who disappeared. Okay? Their bodies are not on the ship. They're just gone. Okay? They're not in any scenes. We don't know what happened to them. We just know that this is the last time they were alive, was in Chapter 7. We're going to have to figure out who they were and what happened to them, too. And you might have an idea about a couple of them, because remember, for example, we did see a couple of fellows being dragged off the ship by tentacles. So presumably they were drowned, and their bodies were, were never found. Their bodies weren't on the ship. Okay. Now, as I was saying, it can be hard to kind of put the events of the game in order. Okay. The Game Boy 712 is saying the insurance adjuster's watch works only on the boat. No, but it only works if you have a body. Okay. And there are only two ways we can get a body. Either there's a body on the ship, or there's a body inside someone's memory. And if there's a body inside someone's memory, we can carry it back into reality with us. Or if there's a body on the ship, we can examine it. But if the body is at the bottom of the ocean, however far away, because remember the ship disappeared 4 years ago, there's no way to go back and examine that. We are not going to try and put the events of the adventure in order, though, of what happened in order just yet. We are going to. By the end of this stream, you will have a very, very clear sequential understanding of the events that played out on the ship. But for right now, again, we're just taking the scenes the game gives us. We're not going to try and make too much sense about what happened. But now we can check out this body in the midshipman's quarters.
Oh no! You're cut!
Don't leave me.
Bear up, son. I'll stay with you.
Tell Pete's mother I tried my best
Aye.
to pull him back, to save him.
You tell her yourself. Brennan! Bring the surgeon's kit!
Alright, so we are in the midshipman's quarters. And we have this person dying, this person is talking to them. We might recognize him as First Mate William Hoskett, since we had already identified him. We have the trail of blood. It's not obvious what he died of, but we already know because there was a knife on the ground outside. So we might guess that, but again, we're not going to guess. Meanwhile, we've got this guy coming down the ladder from above. Oh, we're at the aft of the ship. This is the aft ladder. This guy out here. More bodies. Because apparently this is the ship of the damned. Okay. That's a lot of dithered monochrome blood. Yes, it is. There seems to be a little bit more blood in there than a person might actually have. That's a lot of blood to lose. Okay. Actually, you know what? Okay, we're going to take a look at a couple of things here. Okay, so turning back the page. I want to take note of the fact that at the beginning of each chapter, when it fills in a chapter, and we're in chapter 9 now. So this is after the Kraken's attack, but before the mutiny. Okay. And it's also worth noting that the ship is no longer on its course. So this was the course it was intended to take, to sail south from England, past the Canary Islands, down around the Horn of Africa, and then off to Asia. Off to the Far East. But now it is off its course and between, off toward the Azores. So, whatever that means. Okay. Now, we don't know who this person is, and we'd be guessing to say they were knifed based on the fact that there's a knife on the deck 4 years later. And we probably have a better way to do that. But I do want to show off one mechanic. And I'm going to use this guy to do it. Okay. This person is in the midshipman's quarters. He has a young-sounding voice. Okay. And... oops. Okay. The game does warn you, like, if someone's blurred, it's like, you don't have enough information to do this. But we're going to go ahead and do this anyway. Because I want to point out something. Okay. So we have a young guy in the midshipman's quarters. We can hear his voice is young. And he says, "Tell Pete's mom I tried to pull him back." We don't know who this person is. But we can say, we're pretty sure he's one of the midshipmen. And we're allowed to put that in. Okay? I can say, I don't know who this person is, but he's one of the midshipmen, probably. Now, again, I'm not going to do this for a lot of people, because, again, we're sticking with very positive identifications for now. But I wanted to show off that that's a possibility, because we will use it later somewhat extensively. Okay? But for right now, he's a midshipman. And we're going to just go ahead and fill that in. And we're going to pretend that we didn't notice the knife. And again, that's not positive identity by itself. So we're just going to go ahead and close the book. And lo and behold, there seem to be some other corpses in the scene. I wonder where there might be other dead bodies that the watch is... oh, look! So, now we have another dead body. We have to open the door for the ghost, by the way. Because it's not that kind of ghost. We have to let it out. So then it's got to get out of the way. And by now it's probably appropriate that what we're really doing... or it's probably... I could probably point out without giving away surprises. That what we're going to... the first part of this, what I'm calling part 1... observation, is we're just going to go through every scene of a death that the game is going to show us. We're just going to run through until we have every page in the book revealed, without thinking too hard about any of it. So that's where we're trying to get to.
What's all this, you damn fool?
Whoops! Ah, that was a quick one, huh? So someone got clubbed. Someone else was already dead. We have a trail of blood coming from the officer's mess. Meanwhile, here's Hoskett now. He's coming down from the main deck. And here's who we supposed was a midshipman, dragging himself to his quarters. And now we can probably say, you know what? He was probably knifed. That's probably what he died of, is knife. But, you know, no backsies, and we can't get past Hoskett to go up on the deck. Which often you can, by the way. A lot of times in these scenes, you will be able to get to places that aren't immediately obvious and see what was going on in other parts of the ship, which will become more useful in Part 2, Inspection and Deduction. I hope everybody in the chat is enjoying this so far. Okay. And we don't know who this is, but we know they were clubbed, and we don't know who attacked them. And next, some of these memories are actually pretty short. It's like, oh, yep, that guy got shot. Okay, moving on. Wonder where this ghost is going. The investigator shakes their heads.
Captain. You have a plan?
Yes. Big ship was in
I don't know why, but I love the detail of his hat blowing off. So, yep, we have this. We also now know what led to the young midshipman getting stabbed, but we'll come back to that because now we can actually come up here, and this is what I was talking about, where we could sometimes go up into other places and see what was happening elsewhere on the ship. Like, for example, here's the captain looking devastated for some reason. Probably because people keep dying and there's blood everywhere. Here's a body being tossed over. Here's our first mate, Haska, and that other fellow. So I do want to point out, there's some really subtle clues sometimes. So apart from listening to the accents in this scene, which might help you get some of the nationalities, because the person who was saying enough captain cannot be trusted, you know, he had an accent, and I'm not going to go into more detail because we're not going to do that kind of thing yet, but whatever. But we'll come back to accents and languages and things like that, because that's all going to become important later. But after the young kid raised the mutiny alarm, because he's the midshipman that we couldn't identify, the guy comes out and calls him a fresh bastard. And the word fresh is specifically insulting someone who is green or new or young. That is a very subtle clue that the officer who was cursing at him was cursing a junior officer, in this case a midshipman, an officer in training. So how do you like that for a detail? Okay. I do want to just make sure that we get in here and point out, who is this, how did they die, is they died by adult onset gunshot to the face. But we don't know by who. Okay. And meanwhile, we have a body somewhere in this scene, and oh, it's the body being dumped overboard above decks. So now we can find out what was happening up here.
Let them go!
Okay, so this fella's being shot by that woman down there. We have another body here. Looks like several people on one of the ship's boats. This is probably the guy shouting, "Let them go," who we might recognize as the captain. And this guy climbing over the railing. And here's, meanwhile, Haska and other guy. And if we go below decks now, we can actually see the scene that immediately preceded that. There's our unknown officer chasing the midshipman with the knife. While in the officer's quarters, this fellow is looking very upset. The vocabulary being used here, are you referring to the game or me trying to be true to the terminology as well? Okay. So, we don't know who this is. We know they were shot. And because we're not being too picky, we don't know how or who did it. Okay. Okay. Yeah, the fella who does the stabbing is one of the guys who said, "We take the ship, sail east, sell the cells and wretched fish." So yes, he was one of the ones. So the people plotting mutiny, like if you're following the plot at this point, they were all sitting in the officers' quarters. So they were officers of the ship who were plotting to take the ship from the captain when the midshipman overheard them and raised the alarm that there was a mutiny in progress. Okay. And meanwhile, we're still up here on the stern castle.
Move quick.
You'll not take the last one!
Okay. Alright, so there was a fight over whether or not these people are going to be allowed to take a boat and leave the ship. The captain is firing into the air, yelling to let them go. And we see this person getting stabbed. We can see the first mate running up here. And then down below decks, we can now see the midshipmen listening to the plotting in the officers' quarters. Three people in there, but one of them does not look to be very good right now. I want to point out something in this scene, though, and I'm probably not going to have time before the pocket watch tries to force me into the next scene, but I'm going to say it anyway. Actually, there's a couple of things. So, first of all, people who know the game are screaming at me right now to point out a particular detail. But because of my rules, I had not noticed it at this point in my first playthrough, and I am being true to my first playthrough. Okay. The second thing to note is that in the dialogue, the woman, or one woman in the scene, because there are actually two women in the scene, shouts, "Paul, look out," and then this person gets stabbed. And so we can guess, okay, this person is probably Paul. So if we look down, and actually we might even have noticed that he had a steward's jacket on. Okay, because we know what those look like. Okay, which makes him probably, and we'll look through, we'll make sure there's no other Pauls on the ship, because we only have a first name to go by, and fortunately there's not. So we have a Welshman, Paul Moss. He is the first mate's steward, the servant of the first mate. Okay. And he is being killed with a sword. They had to use killed with sword because there's no verb form of to be sworded. Okay. We don't know who killed him, but you might rightly ask, and we're going to ignore the shaky pocket watch, you might rightly ask, like, how do we know she was yelling at the person who died and not anyone else in the scene? And notice that she is emoting toward our victim. Okay? There is some important emoting that happens. She is reaching out for the guy who's being stabbed as she says, "Paul, look out." So this is not just, well, the name Paul was mentioned, that's probably him. It's like she's yelling at Paul, and we can see that. We can also see that there's another woman and a man down in the lifeboat, a man in a vest. Okay, we can zoom in on them if we want to, and then we can see them on the sketch. But I haven't been using the zoom feature that much yet because we're still in observation mode. Oh, the corpse is down below decks. Meanwhile now, like this chapter is really neat because we bounce back and forth between an A plot and a B plot, but in various scenes we can sort of check in on both. So we'll come back to it because we gotta follow a ghost.
Easy now. You're in a bad way.
Mr. Squid, where is my Frenchman?
The squid's gone. Your mate was torn apart.
Not that. The beast is dead. How? How did you kill it?
We didn't. It left with the storm. Captain came up from the hold. Said he chased it off. You should rest.
A curse like that does not live for nothing.
Okay, so we have this person who, by the way, is missing an arm. So we can say categorically he was torn apart. Okay. Meanwhile, the first mate is coming out of the first mate's quarters. If we hadn't identified him yet by looking at the map and seeing where he's coming out of, we'd now know he was the first mate. And meanwhile, we see the captain is indeed coming up from the hold. And based on the dialogue, the Kraken has just left. And then we have this person coming up behind them, who is... Well, that actually looks like our unidentified midshipman. So this is how he ended up outside the officers' quarters listening to what was happening. Okay. Now this guy we actually can positively identify, and we're gonna, okay? Because in his dialogue he says, "Where is my Frenchman?" And someone tells him, "Your mate was torn apart." So he is someone, an officer, because he's in the officer's mess. He is an officer who has a French mate. He also says verdammt. He's swearing in German, which we may or may not know depending on outside knowledge. But at the very least, we know he is someone who has a French mate. And here we see the bosun's mate is from France. That's Charles Minor. We'll look down. We'll see if we have any more Frenchmen. We do not. So we can conclude that the person who died is Alfred Klestel, the bosun, who is Austrian, and thus that's why he is swearing as he does. We can also say he was torn apart, but while we're probably reasonably sure that he was torn apart by the Kraken, considering that based on the dialogue, the Kraken was just chased off, we can't say for sure. We're going to wait for later until, before we say that for sure. We're going to see if we can't positively confirm how he had his arm torn off. Okay. Okay. And now we don't have any other bodies to find, which makes sense because we're kind of at the end of a chapter. And I was looking for the door back to reality. Okay. So now again, this chapter includes 4 people who disappeared, who we don't know what happened to them. But again, now just running through this chapter, so we know based on the dialogue, the Kraken was just driven off. In the officers' quarters, the ship's bosun and 2 other officers are discussing seizing the ship from the captain, sailing east, selling shells and fish, while meanwhile up above, passengers are being loaded, or people. Well, we know they're passengers because the only females on board the ship were passengers. And 2 of the people in the boat were female. So passengers and others were being loaded onto a boat, presumably to take the boat and abandon ship. The captain there was a scuffle over whether or not they'd be allowed to take the boat. The captain intervened, as did one of the women. Meanwhile, down below, the midshipman overheard the plotting. He was stabbed by one of the officers. Then a scuffle broke out. A gun went off. Somebody died. The first mate and another sailor came down, discovered what was going on, and there was a fight. People were killed, and finally our unknown midshipman died. And meanwhile, we don't know what happened to the people who were loaded into the lifeboat. But now, the first mate's cabin, which was previously closed, is now open. And we can see that there's a body, or a foot, hanging outside the window caught in a line. Also, the door, this is a hatch. The hatch to the orlop deck is now open. And we can come down here and explore. But, you know, before we do that, let's go see what's afoot in the first mate's quarters. Okay, chapter 3.
On your toes.
So this is what...
Go back there!
Here.
Captain!
Slack the lifts and lower the boats. The whole crew will be on us.
Give it up!
Okay, so we have a fella being shot. Clearly a hostage situation. It's a woman who speaks Chinese being taken. And if you know, like, there is a way to identify her right now, but... Okay, we have some crewmen here. Fella was speared. This guy, notice he's also wearing a steward's uniform. He has the collared jacket and the tunic. Loading another boat. There also seems to be a body hung amidships there. Okay. But the only thing we can positively say from whatever the hell is going on here now we're in chapter 3, which is well before previous events. Everything else we saw. Okay. There's one other tiny little detail I want to point out when I get out of the book, just because it's so cool. Okay. All we know is that this person was shot. We don't know who shot him. We know he was shot with a gun. We know nothing else. Okay. I do want to call attention to the fact that you can see that his foot is caught in one of the ship's lines, which explains why after he was shot, he fell over and was dangling there. Okay. You know what? I'll give you this one, BC-56. Oops, shit. Damn it. Okay. I will give you this one, though. Here's the deal. We know she is a woman by her voice and her appearance. And it won't let us open the book until we get the ghost. I'm going to open the book. I'm going to tell you how it is. But first we have to go chase the ghost. Which is going toward one of my favorite scenes. Okay. Okay. So, here's the thing. If we go to the crew roster now, okay, and we go to the sketch, okay, there were 4 passengers from Formosa. Formosa is actually a Portuguese name for the island of Taiwan. Okay. I cannot remember what it means for the life of me. It's a nice name. It was a very complimentary name. It was like Pretty Island or something. But Formosa was the Portuguese name for the island of Taiwan. Very briefly, Formosa was an independent republic, but that won't be for another like 90 years after this story. But so if you know Chinese naming conventions, which I do not, okay. So I only know this because I read this. Okay, this is not me. Okay. If you know Chinese naming conventions, Bun Lan Lim is a female name. The other three Formosan passengers have male names. So you can actually identify her right now as Bun Lan Lim. But we're not gonna. Though, in like 20 seconds, we're gonna know her name. Anyway. Because now we have this Biscuit's here to visit.
Hok Seng Lao, you have been found guilty by self-confession of the murder of Nunzio Pasquale.
这样嘞，一帮这么交代起。
Quiet.
As captain of this ship, and by the authority of the East India Company, and thus the Crown of England, I sentence you to death by firing line.
你救，我给你救。
Mr. Wolf, when you are ready.
Right, sir. Ready, men. Aim. Fire!
Okay. Okay, so there is Hok Sung Lao, and here it is. This scene is awesome, because you probably recognize it as one of the sketches in the book. Specifically, Justice at Sea. And it is so cool that you go into this scene. I just found that awesome. Like, this was the second, like, there are 3 wham moments for me in this game. Okay, and they're all very well done. Wham moment number 1 was the Kraken. Wham moment number 2 is this one. This is really well done that they just put you in this scene. This is also a scene that is loaded with information, including differences between the sketch and reality. Like, for example, the sketch does not show this guy closing... Thank you. Procelus points out Formosa means beautiful island. Like, this guy closing his hand, or covering his ears because he's nervous. We'll come back to that, too. If we hadn't identified Edward Spratt as the sketch artist, now we can identify him if we hadn't done it based on his initials. But we're not, again, we're just kind of taking in the scene, and we didn't even explore the scene that much. Okay. We know that the person who was executed is Hok Sung Lao, one of our Formosan passengers. We know that he was shot with a gun, but we have to specify who fired the gun for our paperwork to be complete. And remember, our goal is just to finish paperwork. That's what this is really about. This is just getting the paperwork right. Which is, I mean, that's what I really love about this game, is that ultimately it's about paperwork. Okay, so we're going to have to come back and find more information. But again, we're just inspecting for now. We're just observing. And hey, there's another body in this scene. We got some folks over here. We will definitely be revisiting this scene and pulling a lot of information out of it. But now's not that time. That's for next week. Because we have this sketch. There is also a... Nope, sorry, we're just an observation, so... We just know that he was guilty of murder by self-confession of Nunzio Pasqua.
Hello? Who is there? Who is that? Is someone hurt? Senora Nichols, is that you? What are you doing down here?
Oh, hello, yes. All fine here. Just, sorting some things.
What's your step? Here, let me help you.
Okay. Alright. So we have a speaker with an Italian accent. And gentleman who is helping him is Signor Nichols. Meanwhile, over here, we have this gentleman, one of the Formosan guards, actually, we can tell by the spear. And if we look at him, it's actually Hak Sung Lao who is executed. And meanwhile, inside here, we have a mysterious chest with this glowing seashell. Nothing else going on. And we are down on the cargo hold. And if we were to look at the map, this is the passenger's cargo storeroom. So this is where the passenger's cargo is stored. I'm not going to bother opening the map. You just trust me. It's really hard now. This is one of the trickier things to identify. And I would even justify it in saying that you almost have to guess this. Not the guy, okay? There's only one Italian on the ship. And considering this body was laying next to Hak Sung Lao when he was accused of murdering Nunzio Pasqua, it's pretty clear that the person who is dying is Nunzio Pasqua. Okay. What is really difficult to discern is that he is being knifed. He's being stabbed. It's very, very hard. Like, it's almost impossible to see, and you do almost have to guess it. It's about the only way that, you know, as he was helping him, Signor Nichols stabbed him. We're not sure what's going on here, but if we look for a Signor Nichols, we find that that's Edward Nichols, our second mate. So he was killed with a knife by Signor Nichols. Okay. You really do have to look, like, very close. It is... The hilt of the knife is just barely visible under his hand, and I don't know how it's going to show up on the stream resolution. But it's almost a guess. That... Cause of death, helping by knife. Yeah. Okay. And that clears up the murder chapter, which is actually a very short chapter. Not entirely sure what was happening there, but it began on the cargo deck when Nunzio Pasqua encountered the second mate, Edward Nichols, who was doing something with cargo while Hak Sung Lao had been knocked out. And then Nichols stabs Nunzio Pasqua. Soon thereafter, Hak Sung Lao is sentenced by the captain for the murder of Nunzio Pasqua to death by firing squad. So we can guess that Signor Nichols lied about it and framed Hak Sung Lao. But what about that self-confession thing? We'll probably come back to that. And then soon thereafter, people were taking the Formosans hostage and sailing away on the ship's two boats. Okay. Now we are left to explore because now remember that the Orlop deck is open to us. And before we start looking for bodies, as we did with the gun deck, it's nice to look around at the Orlop deck. So the Orlop deck is the deck that is level with the water level of the ship, or with the water level outside the ship. Okay, and it has passengers' quarters on this particular ship. And you can see the passengers' quarters here. It's used for storing livestock and other goods. It's not the cargo deck, and it's also the place where the tradesmen do their work. So, for example, now we're here at the fore of the ship. This is the carpenter's workshop. Yeah, there's a blood spatter on the ceiling. Very observant, because we're observing. Right, I'm ignoring the blood. We're just taking a tour of the ship. This is the gunner's store. This is where all the ship's munitions, powder, weapons were stored. Only the gunner and the gunner's mate were allowed to access that. Okay? Which is good to know in case we ever see anybody going in there later. There is also a cow skull on the wall, which is an active corpse. We can tell by the flies. The flies and the dithering are how the game tells us that there are corpses here. We can see that there's a massive blood stain and a lot of blood here. Okay. This here is the ship's surgery. So this is where the ship's surgeon, basically the ship's doctor, took care of injured and sick crew members. This is the purser's, the purser's store. So the ship's accountant worked in here. He would maintain the ship's books. The other thing is that a purser on a ship would often keep a little store of like personal effects and small goods, like extra blankets, playing cards, and tobacco and anything else that he could sell to the crew for a little bit of money, just so that they could just buy personal stuff. And then there's a pair of walks that run the entire length of the ship up the starboard and port sides. These walks allowed the carpenter, and you can see this one actually opens into the carpenter's shop. These walks allowed the carpenter to access the outer hull in case repairs needed to be made. So now I'll pose this to the chat while we're walking around. We've got two bodies here. We have a cow skull, but we also have a little trail of blood here along, where are we? Okay, so this is the port walk. And we have a body back here. So where do we want to go first? Do we want to go to cow skull, or do we want to go to port walk body? Just insurance. No, that's Game Boy is saying, do we want to does insurance cover cleaning up the blood? No, that's a job for reclamation. All right. Let's do the cow skull. I like the cow skull scene. This is a fun scene. We'll save the port walk. 2-3, I think.
Hit her here. One swing. Get through the skull in stone or brain. I'll cut her throat when you've done it. Here? Yeah. Come on before she kicks up. You all right there, sir?
Never been on a farm, Chuck?
Mind your shoes now.
Okay. Now, even though there's a lot of information, in fact, right in front of us, we're not going to fill it in yet, because remember, we're just playing the observation game now. We're only answering what the book tells us. But we can see there's a cow being butchered. One of these young men is not okay with that. And meanwhile, as we walk around the rest of the deck, because the ship did carry livestock for food, we can see one of the Formosan passengers. He is royalty, and the sketch in the book says Formosan royalty, and a guard. We can see this gentleman with his monkey standing here, and And this is presumably the body they were talking about. Take him to the carpenters and get him wrapped. And then, if we look in here, this is the surgery. We see this balding gentleman making a bed. But again, so we're in chapter 2, A Bitter Cold, which is actually very early now in the ship's journey. And my goal tonight, just to warn everybody, is to get through every memory tonight. And that will be the end of part 1. And then next week, same time, I will be back, and we will do part 2 and 3, which will be, inspection, deduction, and cleanup. Okay. We don't have to answer anything in the book, because, it was a large cow, it was slaughtered for its meat. We know it. We know who it was and what its fate was. I'm glad to see that people are already pointing out, oh my gosh, I never noticed that you could do this or that. I now feel good that I'm at least revealing things to people who know the game. Yeah, Game Boy 712. We're still on the ship's planned path. Yes, that is correct. So the ship is still on its proper course. Okay. And now we're one memory earlier in A Bitter Cold.
Well? Same as the other fellow. Some lung disease, non-consumption. Made worse by the cold.
Will it spread?
If so, we'd all have it. They must have picked it up at the Alaska house. I checked all hands just now, and everyone is healthy.
And him? What are his chances?
I gave him some laudanum. We'll see.
Alright, we finally have someone who didn't die of a murder. Obviously, we're in the surgery. These 3 men are discussing the fate of this poor person who has died of some lung disease, same as the other fellow. And presumably, this is probably the other fellow sitting outside. We can't really see much else, but we can still see the Formosans. And I don't think we can... Nope, we can't get upstairs because the hatch is closed. And we can look through some of the ports here. Thank you, the Avatar. I'm sorry, I didn't see the question, Kale. The stream started at 7:30, and next week's stream will start at the same time on Wednesday night, 7:30 Eastern Standard Daylight, normal, correct time. Okay. So we don't have a lot of information to go on it again. We're still doing our observation thing, so even though we could probably make some guesses about identities in the scene, we're not gonna. We're just gonna satisfy ourselves with knowing that this fella, he succumbed to tragic illness. And now this body outside is active as well. Alrighty. I like how even when the body is right next door, the ghost still has to take like this roundabout route. Just to make sure you're paying attention, because it's a bit of a prima donna.
Saya tutup. Aku terpilih.
So either our inspector is like an amazing polyglot, or the magic the magic pocket watch is providing excellent translation. Okay, so we have this guy. He is laying in his bed. He is referred to as Syed, and he is the guy who is the same as the other fellow, lung illness. let's look around a bit. We're not going to, again, not go too crazy, but we're going to take note of what seems to be a normal night. People sleeping. We've got these three guys who are playing cards. They may be the people who we heard talking about cheating, and they had Russian accents, and their language was in the, or their text was in the Cyrillic alphabet, so they're speaking Russian. That tells us something about their nationalities. We also might have noticed that, I don't know the proper name for the alphabet, but these guys are speaking Hindi, suggesting that they are Indian. There is also another clue that they are Indian, but we'll discover that next week. But we do know that this guy is someone named Syed. And he died of illness. Is it Sanskrit? Okay. Yeah, duh, the written form. Okay. Derp. Okay, I'm a derp. But thank you, the Avatar. Game Boy is pointing out that if you can afford a magic pocket watch, you can afford to be hire a polyglot with all the needed insurance-y skills. Yeah. Okay. This is another scene that is loaded, that when we are doing our full-on inspection and making our solid, positive deductions, because we're not going to be guessing at anything, and we are not going to rely on process of elimination until we are absolutely friggin' desperate, this is one of these scenes that we're going to have to come back to. Because this scene is an orgy of clues. But that fills in Chapter 2, A Bitter Cold. Okay. And for those of you who've been watching the time, we are probably about a half hour to 40 minutes from where I want to be at the stop of this. So, that's roughly my guess. Though some of the stuff goes a little bit quicker. Some of these things are a little slow. So, one of the Indian seamen, Solomon Syed, became ill, had a lung infection. Another seaman caught it. And also passed away. And meanwhile, there was a cow being slaughtered, and that was Chapter 3. Much less eventful than, and then a kraken attacked the ship. Alright. Now let's go check out what's going on with our buddy on the port walk here. Let's see what happened to this guy. And if we're attentive, we might have noticed that there was a trail of blood, which is what actually led us to this body in the first place. This is a long chapter, kids. Strap in.
Secure the hold.
Someone shoot the damn thing!
Okay, so here is our body. It's not entirely clear what's happening, but if we look... Okay, so we can look through and we can see there is some kind of multi-legged giant spider monster, as you would expect. And it also looks like there's actually a bullet passing through the wall. So he was shot by a stray shot. Okay. You can see other people with guns fighting off the strange monster. Probably some kind of giant spider crab. Looking through the different ports, we can't see anything. Oh! This doesn't look, this looks unpleasant. Game Boy 712 is saying, what is that? Clearly that's a spider crab. Obviously. They get large. That's a particularly large specimen, but it's obviously a spider crab. They're very distinct. With, of course, a humanoid figure shrouded in kelp riding atop it. As, again, just, you know. They are in the Atlantic. They're north of the Azores or the Canary Islands, which is where you get spider crabs being ridden by shrouded figures in kelp. I mean, duh. Alright. The game's saying we can identify him, but he's also saying it's very, very difficult. Which is okay because we have no clue. But we do know he was shot by a gun. We don't know how, or we don't know who fired the gun. Okay. He was shot by a stray bullet that passed through the wall. And when we go back into reality, we'll actually be able to see the bullet hole. But it is kind of tough to make out. But there you go. Okay, and now meanwhile we have this guy, who appears to be nailed to the wall. Alright. So let's go... Outside knowledge flex there. Yeah, a little bit. What? I know a little bit about the wildlife of the mid-Atlantic. I did do... So, I am lucky enough to have a bit of outside knowledge, and I did use it to help me solve this. But also, I'm not going to pretend I knew everything. I did look up some stuff just so that I would have some interesting other information to fill in the time. It's something that I try to do whenever... Oops, sorry, talking.
I've got you. Don't move. I'll get you down.
Alright. So, I'll talk about that later. Alright, so we have this guy. He is nailed to the wall by these jagged, spiky things. Okay. And someone's trying to help him. Meanwhile here, someone is tossing a bucket of water on a crab with a body. That's the guy who said, "Gimme that gun," who is awesome. The guy in the hat is also awesome. I'm not going to start cooing about my favorite characters yet. This is a very upset person. It's a very upset person. That's my brilliant observational dialogue. And meanwhile, we can see that this fellow was injured, and he was dragging himself away from the situation. And also, we have someone hiding here who looks a little bit tremulous. Yeah, BC56 is pointing out that the death of the guy in the port walk is a pain in the ass because it's hard to make out who's doing the shooting. And we are going to have to figure that out, but not tonight. Who is this? No idea. How did he die? This is a tough one, and I've heard that non-native English speaker, or non-English speaking people have trouble with this particular thing because the phrase that they want you to use is spiked rather than speared. We will use both spiked and speared, but the game wants you to use spiked. He was spiked by a terrible beast. If it's not obvious what happened to him, we will see in an earlier scene, but he is spiked to the wall. So, honestly, localizing this game, because of how much was reliant on languages and things, BC56 is saying, "I thought these deaths will accept both of them." It may be possible that they patched it in. I do know that when it was first released, it was a notorious difficulty, the difference between spiked and speared. So, and things have been spiked in, patched in. For example, when this game was originally released, the treasure chest with the glowing shell, it didn't actually have, it wasn't open and it didn't show a glowing shell. Alright. And by the way, I was joking, but I'm fairly sure that these are spider crabs. Like, they're giant, obviously. They don't normally get that big. Though spider crabs do get huge, but they definitely have the body and shape of spider crabs. Okay. So we have someone on fire. Person and a crab. Someone stabbing. Here we have people running down from above decks. Okay. Meanwhile, we can now see the guys with the guns holding off and looking around the wall for another one. Here's that guy running forward with the gun. And if we want to check in, we can see that initially this guy who was crawling away, his injury was from a spike. The spiking thing may actually be me cheating a little bit because it's not obvious yet. You'll see what I mean. When it happens, you'll be like, oh yeah, spiked. Game Boy is saying, was that the spider crab rider screaming? I don't know. It actually sounded like static. And it's like, I thought there was actually an audio problem. Okay. We don't know who this is, but we know he burned to death. I know the game thinks we should be able to identify him by now. And if we weren't being super methodical and patient, and had been going back and forth already in reasoning, we would be able to identify him. But, again, we're letting the game give us a tour, and we're taking this slow and patient. And no, I'm not going to stop saying that. It could have been the guy who died screaming, because he was on fire, and being on fire is painful. It's a very screamy way to die. I've heard. I don't know from experience. I think there was actually an audio problem, to be totally honest. I don't know why. As I said, I didn't originally play I picked this game up on Steam specifically for the stream. I'm not normally a PC gamer. I do console stuff. So, I haven't played through it like this, which is also why I keep forgetting what it was.
We're no use!
You know what? I don't think that's static. I think that actually is supposed to be the sounds of the crab riders. Who is clawing or strangling these two gentlemen. We've got throwing a lantern to burn it. This guy's fighting it off with swords. Meanwhile, passing guns out of the gunner's store. Someone is securing the hold because he was ordered to, because they're making for the lazarette. A lazarette is a storage at the aft of the ship above the rudder, which was used for storing. It was used for storing like emergency repair supplies, especially ropes, extra sails, and things like that. But also, it would often be used to keep bodies of people who passed during a voyage. It was a good place to put them. So, we don't know who these people are, but we are going to say they were clawed by a terrorist. I keep hitting the wrong button and closing the book by accident. So, and he was clawed. We got another crab rider coming down the stairs. And where is our... Oh, there's a body. Another one spiked to the walls. And I think I never noticed the spider crab rider screaming or talking because I never played this game with a headset on either. It actually sounds very differently through a headset, to be honest. The sounds are even more pronounced. Alright. Do you really... What, you need to stop for a snack in the galley? Come on. Oh, and around, and here we go. You do the hokey pokey, you spin yourself around, and then you get spiked to a wall. Sorry.
What's going on?
Stay back! It's already going to Nick.
Hey! Come on, boss! No, get there! Hey! Cap!
Oops. Okay. Spiked. Because the spider crabs shoot spikes. or the spider crab riders. Guy's throwing an axe, which is awesome, getting spiked, while the other guy's telling him to stay down. There's Lars. I will point it out, Lars Lind is like the unluckiest member of this crew. Got this guy standing with a sword, this guy hiding. We can't get down below decks, but we can actually get above decks. We've got another crab rider up here. We can see this person dead and speared. This person laying across the ship's main capstan dead. This guy hiding here. There's also... I didn't spot him. There is a guy running away. At the beginning of the dialogue, we hear someone say, "And Damon." He's speaking... I think he was speaking Swedish. Which... okay. So we know this guy was spiked by a terrible beast. I want to say it's the Swede who was running away. But we'll find out more about that next week. And note the observation, stay back, it's already done for Nick. Which is, in idiom, it means they've already killed Nick. Get away from them. And we're also up on the deck here, and we have a dead guy who has already been killed. So that does kind of clue us in already as to who we might be seeing next. I keep forgetting you have to release the ghost before you can move. Oh, come on. Come on. I'm not really good with a mouse, honestly. Or the WASD movement. It's just not my thing. If I don't have a controller in hand, I suck at this. So here we have the crab rider spearing this guy. And meanwhile, we have folks on the deck. This guy. This guy seems to be falling in the air. Got another rider. So this is the point where the crab riders are obviously boarding the ship. And they speared this guy, and then they went down to the gun deck, and that's when someone said, "Watch out, he's already done for Nick." So we can guess that this guy who is being killed is probably Nick. And we also have that guy falling from the bridge. There's nothing else to observe, so I'm just waiting for the book. I think we have... Yeah, okay. So, and it's... Notice his face is unblurred and he's easy to identify. So we're going to look through and see if we can find a Nick or a Nicholas or Nicky. Oh, and we have a Nicholas Botterill. He's a topman. So someone who is... someone who worked in the ship's rigging. I think I mentioned that already. So we're going to identify him as Nick Botterill. And he was speared. Because he's been... And he was speared by a beast. Okay. Now we have another body. Okay. And it's... There's a very little mechanical clue tidbit thing here. Okay. It's important to note this man is dead now. Why is that important? I'll get to it. There's a little bit of trickiness with this guy's death. Believe it or not. Potential trickiness. If you overthink it, you can kind of screw it up. Okay, because he's the body that was laying on the capstan. By the way, this thing in the middle of the ship, this is called a capstan. And what you would do is you would put posts in the little holes, and then people could walk around it and turn it. The main capstan was used to raise the wheel. or raise the anchor, not the wheel. Was used to raise the ship's anchors, but it could also be used, lines could be tied around it, and it could be used for hauling and lifting and things like that. There's another one below on the orlop deck. Alright. Yeah, so we are up in the ship's rigging. And we have our victim being struck by lightning. We can see other people here. What they're doing now is they're securing the sails. They're basically... you couldn't keep the sails... the sails out in a terrible storm, because the storm would tear the sails apart. So once the wind got up, you would actually have to secure all the sails so the wind wouldn't rip them up. We can actually see Nick there, and below him the crab rider crawling, or the crab rider is crawling up the side of the ship. We can see another one coming. And meanwhile down below, we can see the seamen hauling. They're basically hauling a line to help raise the, raise the sail. Or secure the sail. I don't know. I'm not a boat. Okay. I said that this guy, you can overthink him. Because you can say that he fell... Like, you can say that he fell. Because it looks like he might have fallen. You know, if you overthink it. But he was electrocuted, obviously. He was struck by lightning. We are in Chapter 6, Part 1. Okay. And we have actually just finished Chapter 6. So when we go back to reality... now, it's going to fill in the book for us. Oh, it didn't. Oh, that's right. It didn't. Okay. Because I chose to come up here. But... as we were down here... the deck... The hatch to the cargo deck is now open. And we can go ahead and we can explore the cargo deck a little bit. Yeah. Right, BC 56, that was the point I was trying to make, is he's dead before he hits the capstan. Okay. And Game Boy is pointing out, yes, when we finish the chapter, I'll run through it. But again, I promise you, next week when we do the rest of the the investigation deduction portion, we're gonna put the events of the ship in order. Okay, we're gonna put this story together so that we have a solid narrative for what happened. All right, so now where are we? This I have to actually check the map, sadly. So I can't remember. Alright, so we are outside... We're outside passenger cargo. Okay. So this is the passenger cargo. Which we were inside earlier. So this is where we saw that weird ornate chest. It was here. Okay. This is the bosun's store. Where the bosun would store extra supplies that he was responsible for. And we have a corpse in here. It looks like the corpse of a crab that we can interact with, but we're going to hold off a moment. Okay. Up here, this also is more of the bosun store, I guess. And we have flies, indicating there was a body here that we can interact with, but we're not going to do that yet, because we're just taking our tour. And then this here is the captain's store. This was where the captain stored his own goods. Which is... I'm so curious about this. There's just a lot of bottles in here. Okay? Like, there's a whole thing. I'll get into it at the end. There is a whole thing about how terrible the captain was, even though I don't think any evidence from this indicates the captain was remotely a bad guy. I'm going to give my own take on who the heroes of this story were. And we have the remains of a body here. So we have 3 bodies to play with. So we're going to go fiddle with the first body. We're going to go fiddle with the crab. That one wasn't very good. Because I think this one cleans up soldiers of the sea. Alright. So, this is how our crab died. He died getting shot. There is actually a guy, I only noticed this recently. There's one of the guys is hiding under the stairs, stabbing the crab. And you can see another guy up the stairs is fighting the crab. So, and there's not much else to take in. Oh, wait, there's this guy here. Who is this? Oh, it's our friend with the tattoos. But our attention should be drawn on the guy who is getting speared to death while killing a crab with a blunderbuss. Or a hand cannon of some variety. Okay. Okay. A hideous monster perished simultaneously with a brave but unfortunate soul. Yeah, the blunderbuss dude is one of the awesome characters in the story. But I will tell you who my favorites are when we get to the end. So he was speared by a beast, but we don't know who he is. Okay. Okay. And now I gotta find the door to reality. Okay. This finishes up Soldiers of the Sea. And we have 2 chapters left to fill in. One of which is kind of weird. Because all the other stuff has been totally normal right now. My timing on this was a little off. Probably because of the initial tutorial and stuff. And my speech at the beginning. But I really do want to just get through all the memories. So if anybody has to, bow out tonight, obviously you can watch the rest of the recording sometime before next week. Okay. So now, this is actually a really weird memory, because we didn't actually hear that much of what was going on. Okay, but we can see cargo is falling, it's actually being lowered down by a crane to the cargo deck. Okay. We have one of the Formosan guards outside the passenger's store. And we can see folks down here just moving cargo, loading the ship. Okay. This is actually a really short chapter. I think there's only 2 parts to it. And actually there's just 1 part to it. So the body that triggered this chapter was not actually a member of the crew. Okay? In one of the barrels that fell, there was a stowaway who was trying to sneak aboard the ship. And when the cargo fell, he was killed. And then when they put that barrel into place, that's where his body was. But his death lets us find this body. Which is not for some reason. Come on, trigger. There we go. Alright, we gotta open the door, let the ghost out.
Wait! No!
So it's the same scene again, just slightly before the person in the barrel died. Okay. So, and again, we see basically the same thing. You can see there's a person. By the way, this down here is the ship's well. Which is a space below the main mast where water could drain. And these tubes run all the way up to the main deck to those pipes I mentioned earlier, so that they could pump out the water from the well. Just fun fact. Now, we don't know who this person is, though we may have a suspicion about his name. But we do know he was crushed by falling cargo. Okay. I always have trouble finding my way back to reality from the cargo deck. There we go. Okay. So now we're in Chapter 1. We're at the very beginning of the journey. Or actually not really the beginning of the journey. If you want to get absolutely technical, the ship left London. It set out from London. A few days later, it docked in Falmouth, England, to pick up cargo. And that's when this incident happened. Which is why the ship was already underway at this point. Okay, and we know that our person was killed by falling cargo during an accident, and then after that, someone else, a stowaway was in one of the barrels unknowingly. He was in there too. How many actual confirmed fates have we gotten? Very few, actually. Because I'm insisting on being so methodical. So on the back cover, these lines tell us how many fates we have. So we've identified 6. Which is okay. That's the plan. That's how this goes. Don't worry. Okay. This also, by the way, is the lazarette that I was talking about earlier. And an attentive person might notice several spikes driven through the wall. And now we have this body.
Keep pressure here.
Hold him down. What madness is this? 20 years my steward had never a doubt on your sanity. Explain yourself.
Those ungodly beasts carry a curse. Throw them back or doom us all.
Tie him up and put him in the lazarette with those things. He may yet find his senses.
Come on.
All's fine, John. Been in worse spots, I think. Where's the rest of his leg?
I'll say this one actually gave me a bit of trouble, but let's look around a bit first. Okay. So we have this guy, had his leg cut off, bloody sword on the ground. This fella is being dragged away by people. The captain is here. And then up here we can see, oh, there's the artist. He wants to get downstairs and know what's going on. And meanwhile, whoops, what am I hung up? Oh, I can't get around these. Okay, here we go. Meanwhile, we have an ornate chest being hauled down the ladder. Several people gathered here on the deck above. I did identify, so people are trying to figure out who I have identified so far. Okay, so I have had confirmations on 6 people, but I think I have something like, I think I might have 7 or 8 people I have identified. But I don't want to get too distracted with that. Remember, this is just observation phase. We're just going through. Trust me. Trust me. But what do we know about this? Because we can actually answer everything we need to know about this fella right now. Okay. So there's some clues right here in the dialogue. And this one, I will admit, gave me some trouble. Okay? The gentleman who's caring for him says, "Everything's all right, John. We've been in worse spots." And then turns aside and says, "Where's the rest of his leg?" And he is comforting this guy. He's saying, "It's okay, John. Everything's going to be okay." That's what we're supposed to... Shit. That's what we're supposed to take from this. So we know that this guy is John. But we have a couple of Johns. We have John Davies, the fourth mate. And we have John Naples, a seaman. So we could probably guess that he is John Naples, the seaman, based on his current whereabouts. Not so sure. But we are going to say that he ultimately died from being killed by a sword. But who killed him is actually also in the dialogue. Okay? Because the captain is shouting at this guy, and he's like, "What were you thinking? You've been my steward for 20 years, and you've never done anything crazy before, and now this." We also might note that somebody is speaking Swedish, if we know what Swedish looks like. Okay, so the person who killed him with the sword is the captain's mate. The captain's steward, Philip Dahl, the Swede, who has been 20 years his steward and never a doubt on his sanity. We could also surmise, if we really wanted to, like, based on his position in the sketch, he is part of the firing squad. He is not a member of the officer class. He's one of the seamen. So that would tell us, too, that he is John. But we're going to hold off on that. We're going to see if we can come up with any better way to identify him later. We're going to pretend that we're... Come on. Open. Okay. And meanwhile, we had a body above deck. We are on the orlop deck. All right. Okay. So, these fellas are carrying a stretcher. They've stumbled on the stairs. This guy is basically getting his head caved in by the stretcher. Okay. See this guy, carpenter's shop. Got these guys. And I'm not sure that we can actually see what's on the stretcher just yet. And we can kind of look above, and we can see some people looking down from above as well. But we can't get past them. Okay. So this is one of these fates where it will accept multiple explanations. We can say that he was crushed. Or we can actually say he died of falling down the stairs, and that is my personal choice for how to identify his death. Whoops, not exploded. That was a misclick. Fell from the stairs. So I am going with fell down the stairs. Oh. And now we have another body from this scene. Falling, exploding, what's the difference? The cleanup, actually, is the difference. Come on, don't be shy. Just come on around. Alright.
Clear the deck. Move the boat to stern and throw the bodies over.
What's your foot in?
Hey there, what's this? Give him to me and I can fry us a solid meal, boys.
Heaven now. Take it slow.
What's it, gentlemen? There's a free shell here. Let's have a look.
No, get back.
Alright. So we got this fella being whipped by this creature. Because we haven't had enough strange creatures yet. We've got this thing with its tail. The whole crew is gathered around to watch it being taken. Except for this panicky guy who is the captain's steward, Philip Dahl. That's the point where his sanity broke. We can see these three guys talking. We can't, I don't think, get around them and up the stairs, so we can't go up on the main deck. You can see we have two stewards here. Oh wait, we can go up the stairs. So, oh yeah, we can. So up on the main deck, there seems to be some serious activity happening here. Oh, and we missed it. Okay. We're in the home stretch. Okay. From the dialogue indicating here what's give this to me and I can fry us a solid meal. And the fact that he has a fork. Damn it, wrong button again. And the fact that he has a fork. And his accent, which I believe is Irish. We can identify this as the ship's... Oh, he's English, sorry. Oh, God, I'm so sorry. He is Thomas Sefton, the ship's cook, and you kind of have to poke around a bit to find this one. He was struck by the tail of a beast. I think there's a couple other things it will accept. Okay. Meanwhile, up here on the deck, I didn't really get a chance to look at it. We've got bodies. We've got upsetness. We've got a chest being brought on a boat. Or being brought off a boat. There's a lot of stress going on up here. We have the ship's officers are all talking amongst themselves. Yeah. What is this? Ooh, that's a spike of some kind. And we have a couple of bodies. Now this ship is absolutely just covered with bodies. Just come on. Come on, land. Don't be shy. Plop down your grisly cargo. There we go. Okay.
Lift this out and take it below.
What the hell is going on? What do you know about these things? About the chest and your dead friends?
这是虾米？回来，全部供出来，拢是恁害啦！迄个害得较对人无保护，是让人笨死的啊！He talk about a shell, very dangerous.
Shell? What shell?
So we have these two folks here. They are being run through with spikes launched from whatever is being hauled up. We've got more bodies being tended to. Oh, see, here's the sailors using the capstan, as I described earlier. They're using it. You can see that they've tied a line off, and they're using it to haul this body in a net up while it is being guided onto the deck by this sailor. Okay. And meanwhile, they've got that red chest. They're getting it off the boat. Can we get below decks? I don't think we can go anywhere else details in this scene. So I think it's just that. It is really worth wandering around in every scene, which is one of the reasons why I didn't want to, like, try and, like, oh, this guy's obviously this guy's obviously that on the first playthrough, or on the, you know, on the run-through of all the scenes, because then you kind of miss some of the stuff. Like, you could go down and see that one midshipman listening at the door and see him being chased and stuff like that. And you miss out on that if you just immediately start trying to give information. So, and I think that fills in the Unholy Captives chapter. And brings us to this. This is the final chapter we're going to have to fill in. So this is... So this is going to be chapter 4. I think there's 6 total parts to it. And this is the weird one. Okay. So we're pretty much... Basically, we're at bodies -6. So, wait, I can actually do this. So we know there's 60 people on the ship. There's 2, 3, 4, 5... There's 6... Somebody do math. We have 60 people on the ship. There are 6 people who share scenes, who die at the same time as someone else. So, and then there's 7, 4, 7 and 4 is 11, 12, 13 disappearances. 13 or 14 disappearances. I can't do it. I'm so close. I could have told you, but I can't remember whether it's 13 or 14 total disappearances. Hey, BC 50. Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't realize what you were saying. I thought we had a spoiler. But yeah, so we're down to just 6 people who disappeared. Or 6 pages left, and I think we have. So that's 6 plus. I really want to say only 2 disappearances in this chapter, but I think it might be 3. I'm just going from raw memory right now, honestly. So, I don't. We have 6 pages to fill in. 6 pages to fill in, and then we're done with part 1, and then I can bid you all a good night, and then we will come back next week.
Ahoy! Wait! Don't shoot! I have treasure! I yield!
Hold your fire!
Okay. So we have... This gentleman is calling back to be led on the boat, insists he has treasure. He is being shot by someone... One of the Formosan... I shouldn't have done that, because we're not trying to identify that. We have someone else looking out a window. Port, I should say. We can see that he's got a body, and then some sort of monster. Another body, more monsters, glowing shell. Looks like he has a total of 3 mermaid-like creatures. Kel Bowman is asking what's going on, which is we're approaching the 4-hour mark, so it's a little late for that question. But yes, essentially, you are attempting to identify how every one of 60 people on board this ill-fated, doomed voyage lost their lives, or didn't. That's the goal. But this is literally the story of why when the ship came drifting back to port, there was no one left on board. 4 years later. Okay. We're supposed to be able to identify him, but we haven't been filling in information very diligently because we've just been doing observation, so we don't know. We do know he was shot. We can't be with a gun, but we can't be sure who shot him. So that's good enough. By the way, identifying positively everybody and doing all of the cleanup will take literally half the time that this is all taking. Like, once we start by doing it this methodically, it's going to be... We're going to breeze through it. It's going to be like butter. Trust me. You have no idea. Alright, we have another corpse here. And the whole story will make sense. Beginning to end.
休假，休假。
Okay. So we have fire coming out of the chest. We have an arm on fire of our victim. So he is on fire. Meanwhile, that guy is dragging a mermaid onto the boat. The two boats, by the way, have been tied together because there's no one rowing the second boat. So, and that's it. And we are well off the... We are well off the Obra Dinn at this point. We are somewhere. And there's not really much else to see. So the only thing we can say for sure is that our friend, one of the members of the Formosan contingent, is on fire and then died, leading us to conclude that he burned. And there is another corpse in this scene. In the other boat. And this will bring us another corpse. You know, I didn't really talk about this earlier because it's happened a few times. So, there's a number of places where the corpse on the ship doesn't match up with the person where the person died. And the book makes note of that. It mentions that these people were moved post-mortem. Their body was moved after they died. So while we're seeing the moment... So while we're seeing the moment of their death, we're not necessarily seeing where their body ultimately ended up. So we have, this is our victim in the scene. We don't know what happened to her. We can see bolts of lightning coming out of this chest, striking the mermaids. We have person is speared in the boat. We have another person with a knife sticking out of his back. And someone cowering in a boat in the back, cowering in the other boat. There's an oar drifting away. Another oar drifting away. So, yeah, I mean, this scene speaks for itself. There's really, you know, it's just, he let the lightning out of the box. And it's anti-mermaid lightning. Okay. 3 fates to go. So it says the corpse was moved post-mortem. So she died on that lifeboat away from the Obra Dinn. But her body was brought back to the Obra Dinn and then moved onto the deck. Oh, and we actually, we don't know who she is from this scene. We probably remember at this point she's been referred to several times as Miss Lynn. We don't have to go fill that in. But it's not actually clear in this scene entirely how she died. She's just laying there dying and now she's dead. She's a bloody mess. But, you know, we don't know. So we'll just leave that to be figured out another time. This guy, we could see a knife sticking out of him.
You still breathing? Can you roll? Nichols, sir, shoot them for God's sake!
Okay. So here's our victim, who had a knife in his back, and we can see now that the guy who burned, the member of the Formosan royalty, the Formosan passenger, one of the Formosan passengers put a knife in him. Have a speared guy, mermaid reaching onto the boat. On the other boat, oh, here. Our female passenger is being clawed or strangled or kissed to death in some way. The game will actually accept either clawed or strangled. We've got this guy who looks like he's falling overboard. This guy who's got a spear through him. This guy cowering. Someone in the scene is named O'Hagan. Somebody in the scene is named Nichols, who we already know is the first mate, or the second mate, the ship's second mate. But we don't know who's who. And since we don't even know the name of our Formosan royal, we don't know who this person is. We know they were knifed, but we don't know the name of the person who killed them. So we're going to have to figure that out. Alright, and now we have a body. And this is a body that never makes it back to the Obra Dinn. Yes, BC 56. Any questions should be held for the end.
Where is it? Where? Something there! I see it! Give us a weapon! Shoot it! Mike and I!
Pick up the oars and row, you fools!
Okay. So now we see the mermaids attacking the two boats. We have... I lost track of who our victim was in this scene. That was really... I was distracted looking at the chat. We have a guy being pulled out of the boat by one of the mermaids. Okay. This is a really interesting detail, but we'll come back to it when we revisit this. Because remember, we really don't care how much information we get right now. Okay, we're just getting a sense of what was going on in each of these scenes. And then it's all going to click into place very easily. I promise. Oh, the victim is the guy who's being speared. Thank you. Okay. Oh, right. This is OA. I mean, I don't know who got speared. Oh, no, it's not. That's not O'Hagan anyway. Maybe it is. I don't know. I'm not supposed to know who it is. But anyway, it doesn't matter. All we know is he was speared. He was speared by a beast. We do know that there's a Russian in the scene. We know the Formosans are here. They're speaking Chinese. But actually, the Formosans should be speaking Hokkien, which is a Chinese dialect that was spoken on the island of Formosa. So there's actually a little bit of there was a little bit of trickiness with the Chinese dialects when they were actually writing and recording the game.
You'll reach the Canaries in 3 days. You packed enough stores?
Aye, sir. Checked and loaded them myself.
Good. Stay quiet and alert. If the wind picks up, we've no chance against the Obra Dinn.
休假，你玩做不？
我冇问题，但是伊来想啊，绝对袂当互伊落去水底。
那是遐个怪物出现，你绝对卖起来。
Aye, shut it up.
They say strange things about monsters.
Oh, we have another person being speared. Okay, so Cale Bowman is pointing out that it's nothing like Mandarin. They're actually, to be properly accurate, they should be speaking Cantonese. is the dialect they would have been speaking, to be period accurate from where they are from. The Formosans are speaking Hokan. The Chinese sailors speak Cantonese, which is why they don't quite understand each other, but understand some words. Because occasionally the Chinese sailors are translating for the Formosans, but they are only getting bits and pieces. Which is why they say strange things about monsters, or he says something about a shell, everybody will die. So, which also calls back the... See, I don't want to do this now because I purposely said we're doing this in the second stream, but this does call back the self-confession that the Formosan, based on which the Formosan was found guilty of murder. Because the question is who was translating that. But we'll talk about that another time. And again, I wasn't paying attention. I kind of lost track of who died and why. But that's okay. We're coming back here. Okay. There was also an issue with finding Chinese voice actors who could speak the proper dialects. It was a little... Oh, there were only 2 who disappeared. Okay. Alright. And that is it. We have now... Whoop. I'm going to be quiet a second.
Boy! In there somewhere! Storm's coming! Finish your business and climb down here!
Okay. Okay. So we have now finished... So, again, the game's pacing is excellent here. Because we have now seen every memory. Every corpse is now accessible, and we can now start running back through them. We can visit any memory. We can fill in any information. We can go back and forth. Not only that, but... if we go on to... Whoops. If we look at the ship's deck plan, every corpse has been mapped out, and the chronological flow of time is shown, guiding us from one corpse to the next. Which gives us an interesting opportunity to go through this story once again in any order we want. And so what we are going to do next time, and the way we are going to solve 90%, that's a rough that's just a word I chose. I don't actually know by numbers it's going to be 90%. But what we are going to do next week on Wednesday is we are going to run through the events of the ship in chronological order from start to finish so that we see the whole story play out in the right order. And as we do so, we are going to identify, we are going to deduce as much information as we possibly can. It will go much faster than this first playthrough. It takes a long time just to see every fate the first time. In places, we are going to skip through some dialogue to make things go faster if the dialogue is meaningless, especially because it's transcribed in the book. So that's next week. I realize it seems like I didn't get anywhere because we just took a tour and we let the game walk us through the story in sort of a convoluted, back and forth, weird chronological order. But now we're going to do it properly from beginning to end. And you can do it either way. Okay, you can also choose to just go through every scene the same way you just did them, or we could bounce around and just start making deductions and filling in details. But because I want to be really methodical about it, and because I want to understand how events played out, we're going to start at Chapter 1, Part 2, not Chapter 1, Part 1, and go through the entire story in chronological order, except for one place where the game will not let us do that. So, but that's next time. So I hope everybody had a good time. I realize that if you've already played through the game, this stream didn't have a whole lot of new information or excitement to, you know, compared to what it's going to be next week, where I'm really gonna go through and we're gonna really take this game apart. We're gonna see, you know, we're gonna see everything there is to see. So that's it. Thanks everybody for hanging out, and have a great night.